And it's Tuesday, July 9th, in a very interesting little over a week here. And we are really going to have some fun on this episode of the Suppress Herald. Reminder, this is all about politics being local, and so is propaganda. And we continue to look at our local papers here in Maine, and it's typical of papers being bought up by the national, call it trust of local news for local news, bought up by a bunch of billionaires buying newspapers. Don't forget, George Soros is also in the process of trying to buy over 200 radio stations. These people are trying to take control of the narrative and take control of the message and basically create a massive propaganda machine. They already pretty much own social media, as we know. And what we've got here is in the last week and a half, everybody that's paying any attention to the news knows that it's a Biden blow up. And really, what we're looking at is an example, an incredibly visual, easy to see example of propaganda at work. What we've had over the last 4 years is a Joe Biden who can barely function. We've been talking about this. Anybody with any sense, any common sense, has been observing Joe Biden from the campaign when he spent the entire campaign in 2020 in his basement, hiding out, wasn't able to go out, wasn't able to do any really rousing speeches, wasn't able to do off the cuff. Meanwhile, Trump was doing two, three, four live hour and a half long rallies a day during the campaign. And yet it was Biden who got the 80 million votes, right? So here we have, 4 years later, here we go again. But this time he's going to have to, go out. He doesn't have a COVID, excuse to stay in the basement. But what happened last Thursday in that debate blew the lid off what they've been doing for 4 years, which is covering up for a feeble, incapacitated, what we call president. I believe what this really exposes is that he hasn't been in charge at all through this entire campaign, from the campaign all the way through the Biden regime in Washington. This exposes that there are other people in charge here. You can't believe that a guy that can't function anytime but between, say, 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, puts a lid on all the time, needs more sleep, they say. That is not someone functioning as the president of the United States. So who is? A lot of people have been asking this question. The problem is the propagandists have been doing this cover up for all these years. And now, last Thursday, the whole thing blew up and it got basically the cover got peeled back and we saw what's inside, which is not much in the mind of that president of the United States. And it's really telling to look at what's going on with the media. And I'm going to take you through all the way from Wednesday, June 26th, the day before the debate. In the opinion section, upcoming presidential debate has the makings of history. And of course, they go on to bash Trump throughout this. And here's just one line. At 81, Joltin' Joe Biden ain't joltin' anymore. Trump has eagerly pointed that out countless times. Biden is not going to win any awards for fancy footwork at the lectern, but he will need to be steady as he goes Joe, be feisty, be aggressive, and duck Trump's haymakers. Trump didn't throw any haymakers. Trump just stood there and watched him implode. And they were delusional. I think they thought that spending a week at Camp David with his doctors and handlers and prep would have the guy ready to do an hour and a half debate. If you spend a week resting, all the rest, and then the excuses started flying. But it's really amazing to watch this process. And basically on Thursday, this is the day of, and really nothing in the paper about it. And basically, they went after Trump. Trump's tax plans would wreck the economy for middle class. Right. What he did in his first term bolstered the middle class massively. Support for Trump leaves me stumped. Find a younger candidate for president. There was actually a criticism of President Biden's age in a small article letter to the editor. But nothing really. The upcoming presidential debate was Wednesday. Thursday paper, the day of the debate, it was just Trump bashing. And then this is the best part, okay? That debate wasn't that late. It was over before the paper went to press. And yet, the next day, there was nothing on Friday in the paper. Just nothing about what happened on Thursday night. Nothing here. There's Supreme Court bashing. We talked about that. And South Portlanders understand hard reality, rising sea levels. So we had some global warming and some Supreme Court bashing, but nothing in the paper the next day. But there was an article, Biden Trump try to reshape narrative. Both candidates are trying to reach a population that's wary of partisan politics, but it's unbelievable. For full coverage and analysis from Thursday's presidential debate, please visit Press Herald. There was nothing there. You know why? This is Friday after the debate. The people at the paper had not gotten their directions yet. They hadn't been told which way to go on this. And this is what's been happening. They were in a quandary, so they didn't write anything. They had just sort of a general piece that said nothing. And there was no real story written about it. And yet, if you know, the bashing and the basically the meltdown of the liberal press, CNN and MSNBC after that debate, a virtual meltdown. They were speechless. They couldn't even understand this. How could this have happened? Biden was just crashed and burned. But that happened past when the papers had to go. So they didn't have the direction that, oh, okay, the media is going to go after Biden and criticize him for a really bad debate. They hadn't gotten the directive right off the bat, so they didn't write anything. And then the front page of Saturday, all the way to Saturday, 2 days later, Biden faces Democrats' doubts after rocky debate. The president aimed to dispel fears about his age and ability to govern, but a stumbling showing against Donald Trump had some party leaders asking if he should be replaced on the ticket. Biden concedes fumbles but vows to defend democracy. Here's why it would be tough for Democrats to replace Biden on 2024 presidential ticket. This is just waffling and basically articles saying, well, you had a bad day, you had a bad night, you had one bad night. And it just goes on and on. But for many voters, tough choice got tougher. But basically, what they do is bash Trump and say, well, the democracy's on the line. So even if we, elect a crash test dummy, which is what we got, who crash test dummy in diapers, it isn't going to matter because we got to stop Trump. That's where they're at. And, we joke about the sequel to, a sequel movie called Weekend at Joe's, but it's not too far off. Democrats struggle to make room for younger leaders. President Biden seems emblematic of a generation that doesn't want to make way to pass the torch. And then, of course, here's the big one. Okay. Biden crashed and burned in front of millions, 50 million watched and another 20 million online streaming. 70 million people watched Biden crash and burn, and there's no question. And it's all just a matter of, they have to figure out with the propaganda machine when and if to pivot and which way to pivot. And I think what this really has demonstrated is that nobody's in charge there. You've got call it the deep staters that are running things in the Biden White House, a handful of people. Susan Rice was there for years, left not too long ago, but here's Susan Rice was from the Obama White House, and she didn't really have a title. She was like a presidential advisor. She was the conduit from the Obamas living in Washington, D.C., first president in history to live there, other than one that was paralyzed or whatever and in a hospital. And it's plain as day that this is Obama's third term to a lot of people. And now we're starting to understand it absolutely was that. But what they've got to do is get into some of the questions Trump dodged Thursday. Climate change, January 6th, the Middle East were among topics the GOP candidate avoided. Yeah, January 6th was just a riot with a bunch of people at the Capitol that were really pissed off that, with the other 50 million Americans, know that that election was tainted at best. But they've got to basically pivot and bash Trump to take the heat off of Biden's situation. Now, on to Sunday. There's a few days later. New York Times editorial board calls on president to drop out of race. So now you've got the New York Times saying Biden has to go. That was Sunday. And you've got in the Sunday paper a letter to the editor. So this is where the position of the deep state is. I just gave up my best job ever. President Biden must do the same, telling him to drop out. And then you have this is really good. This is in the following week. This is this week on Wednesday, the opinion section. This is when things start to pivot. And this is what you see propaganda start to do its thing. Race for the presidency is between a codger and a dodger. And basically what this says is I'd rather take the codger than a dodger. Codger being Biden, who is a lot worse than a codger. He's almost a mummy. And a dodger, which Trump's not a dodger. He takes everything head on. And it's really interesting. But here's the pivot. This happened on Wednesday. So a week into this, we get the pivot started. And of course, we have on Thursday, July 4th, you had our local Congressman Jared Golden, a Democrat. Op-ed sends political shockwaves, but it fits Golden's campaign style. Yeah, he's a consummate politician who knows, just like Susan Collins, that if you just go down the middle, you'll get elected in Maine because people aren't that discerning of you playing political games. So here he goes saying that, well, reality is Trump's probably going to win, and I'm okay with that. And of course, that wasn't too good for the people at his party. I'd be surprised if he survives, going his next trip to Washington. You're not supposed to do that. But here we have a situation with Jared Golden, representative, congressman from Maine, does an op-ed that basically says it's okay if Trump wins. And then we've got Thursday, July 4th. White House, Biden absolutely not dropping out. Mills Governor Mills here in Maine joins meeting with president as he works to shore up support. This is the don't believe your lying eyes propaganda machine kicking in. So here we're going to it was just a bad night, and Biden's okay, and Mills, Governor Mills and some other governors or other, yeah, Democratic governors, 24 Democratic governors meet, some virtually with Biden and the vice president, and they start to turn the tide. And then an opinion piece on Thursday, July 4th, your armchair medical opinions about Biden are useless. Too often, dementia is used by laypeople as a catch-all term for any fumble by an older person. And there we go. They're going to try to salvage the crash test dummy. Convention delegates from Maine are sticking with Biden, a whole front page story in the Friday, July 5th paper. While several lament the president's fumbling debate performance, they say he's still the better candidate and it's too late for Democrats to rally behind an alternative. And here we go. Don't believe your lying eyes. He's fine. And we're going to see him through. Basically, back to the basement. We'll steal the election form, stuff ballot boxes. Wisconsin just had the Supreme Court out there that changed hands, just turned over and reversed a decision that unmanned drop boxes can be used again in their election. So here we go, getting ready to stuff the ballot boxes and steal an election for a crash test dummy. Biden's accomplishments put him far ahead. The president is, in all likelihood, not going to step down. Let's focus on bringing him forward. Here we go. That was Saturday, July 6th. So a week and a half later, we've gone through, we've pivoted. Defiant Biden says voters, this is on Sunday, July 7th. Defiant Biden says voters should decide election. The president's team urges top Democrats to stay quiet about their concerns. Observers, Biden is aging, still ask good questions. Nothing to see here. This is propaganda at its absolute best. First, they didn't know what to do. The presidential election buck stops with voters. Let the voters decide. That's the editorial in the Maine Sunday Suppress Herald. So there you have it. I mean, this is an amazing demonstration of what a propaganda machine looks like. We went from not reporting on the crash and burn debate performance of Biden the first day because they hadn't gotten direction yet on which way this was going. Then they started out with Biden being too old, maybe we got to replace him. But then powers that be shifted and Biden decided he's not going. So they shifted right over to, well, it was just a bad night. Oh, he asked good questions. He's still with it. He's still got it. And now they're going to try and basically tell us, don't believe your lying eyes, which should be the Democrat Party's platform. Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe the borders open wide open and millions of people are streaming in here. Those videos, that's just deep fake videos. Don't believe Biden's falling down, mumbling, stumbling, and has serious issues. That's deep fake videos. Don't believe that there's all this crime. 100 people over the July 4th weekend were shot in Chicago. Something like 17 of those died. That's not in the paper. But Biden is okay. That's in the paper. That's what we've got. We've got a situation. They should just put across the headline of the paper every day, don't believe your lying eyes. And they're going to try and tell us, those 70 million Americans that watched that and the other millions and millions of Americans that saw the videos on all sorts of social media of the stumbling, bumbling, incapacitated idiot in the White House. And you're not supposed to believe that. It's not real. Deep fakes, forget about that. We're supposed to forget that they've conned us and propagandized us for years about the condition of this president, which is absolutely horrendous because our national security and beyond is really taking a hit when you've got a president in the White House that our enemies, they don't believe their lying eyes. They know what's going on. They don't buy propaganda. They do their own homework. They do their own espionage, and they probably know more than 99% of Americans about what's going on. They probably know that Obama's running the White House indirectly. And that's what they're making decisions on. There's no chain of command, and it's a situation that's really, really dangerous. But don't believe your lying eyes. He's fine. This is what propaganda looks like. And here we have it in our local paper. You can just see the progression through less than 2 weeks of a dramatic, don't do anything because we don't know, we haven't got our instructions yet. Then it's Biden looks like, everything was leaning, the mainstream media, everybody was saying he's got to go. So that's where they went. And then they're pivoting now and they're trying to cover up that it ever happened. Nah, nothing to see here. He just had a bad night. Everything's fine. And they've gotten away with this before. And I think they can get away with it again. And I hope the American people are smart enough to realize they're being hoodwinked and that another 4 years, well, one, he's not going to be the president for another 4 years. Kamala Harris right now is slated to be his vice president. Heaven forbid he wins an election and she's going to be the president. Having, to be honest, mentally, it would not be an improvement. Going from Joe Biden, who's got serious dementia or other issues, mental issues, to Kamala Harris, who is absolutely incompetent. She nothing but word salads. She has no business being a leader, manager of anything. And here we are. And I hope the American people realize that this is just a really bad situation and we can't let this continue. So that is a special edition of the Suppress Herald podcast talking about the deep state and the propaganda machine that is leading us down this trail, leading us by the nose, they think, and telling us, don't believe your lying eyes. It's a perfect example and just hard to believe that they're trying to pull this off. But they are. So, with that, we'll be back soon.